Division 3 from Great Britain, and I'm here today to talk through a few of the things that we've been doing around the ocean in our project, Visible Ocean. There's a few things I want to get through today. I want to explain, or I want to talk about understanding how immersive experiences can take audiences together. I want to talk about building mutually beneficial partnerships with brands and with foundations. And also, I want to talk about how we can make it worth it for venues, so we can actually get it out to our audiences. And I thought we'd just start by showing some of our content, just to give you a bit of an idea, and then we'll get into a bit more detail. Okay, so we started with a simple question: how can we connect audiences to a world they can't see under the surface? We thought about how people think about the ocean. Most people have what we call a shore-deep relationship. We understand the waves, understand there's some big species out there, but there's so much more important around our ocean that we just can't see with our eyes. So bringing all this together, we have this whole idea of using immersive experiences as a way to connect us to an invisible ocean. Now, we're going to dive in. But what we do with our experiences, especially with the next one that I'm going to talk about, especially with kids, is we ask them before they begin to take 3 big breaths. So we're all going to do it together. I'm going to take 3 breaths with me, and then I'm going to explain why I'm going to do it. So if everyone's ready, 1, 2, 3. Okay, now only one of those breaths came from trees. 2 of them came from the ocean. Now, if you work in the ocean, you know this, but for a lot of people, this is the first time they're thinking about it. We understand why trees are important to our lives on the ground, but we just don't really think about the ocean as being that important. So, there's a project called Drop in the Ocean, which we have next door. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and 2 more of our projects, and I'll bring them all back together again at the end. Drop in the Ocean has the mission of connecting kids with the smallest parts of our ocean, microplankton. So we have created an experience where we can explore how phytoplankton creates this oxygen that you've just breathed in, but from the perspective of plankton. So we shrink audiences down to a size much smaller than humans. So now they're at the bottom of the ocean, at the depths of the ocean, and they're understanding what it's like from a different perspective. I was very lucky. My business partner's father has won several Academy Awards for inventing special cameras for filming under the ocean. So we began this project with an amazing archive of marine micro photography. But the question again was, how do we bring it to audiences in a way that is different and immersive and connects them again to this ocean? So we want to explore a couple of things. We want to explore microplastics and how microplastics enter the base of the 3D web. And we also know that traditional media just isn't doing enough to connect audiences in the same sort of way. So using the photography as a basis, we went all the way back down. We built these experiences out, and we're able to take audiences from the base of the ocean, and we needed to get them up to the surface. So what we ended up doing in the end was creating like an elevator effect. We are riding on a giant jellyfish. So if you do the experience just over there, you'll see how it works. You stand with this jellyfish, you begin in what's called the midnight zone, which is where it's so dark, you can't actually see any light until black. And as you're looking around, what what you see, you think they're stars, they're actually phytoplankton, which is, as I mentioned, our ocean's smallest plants. We worked with Conservation International, and our brand partner for this experience was a company called SC Johnson. And the whole plan was really to sort of amplify this larger mission and use these experiences as a way to kind of drive people toward more sort of connection with the ocean. We're lucky to work with Philippe and Ashlyn Cousteau as our narrators and our main sort of ocean drivers. They have a book that they've published which is called Ocean for Dummies, and we don't assume that our audiences are dummies, but it's a great way. They're incredibly good storytellers, and they work with us to sort of bring all this together. As you can see, this is some of our, this is called a Bolenopsis. And for a lot of people, introducing these species is the first time they're sort of seeing it at this sort of scale as well. Now, the heart of what we're trying to do, as we're sort of taking them through microplastics as well, in the experience you see when you go next door, plastics on the queue, so you're seeing it from a very different perspective. You're no longer seeing it from a human perspective, you're seeing it very much from the ocean's perspective. Now, what's important for the experiences that we create is that they're shared experiences. So we're thinking about how we can sort of bring audiences together. What we have next door is the single player version, but typically when we go to festivals or to events, where we're using them as a multiplayer experience, which means that audiences see each other and they're connected. Now this is how we launched it originally. This was in the Tribeca Film Festival in 2019. As you can see, I got a little bit carried away with the set design, with our giant 4 metre high, 5 metre high jellyfish exhibit. But it was a way to sort of put audiences together in the space. You can see instantly this is a very different experience to people when they're watching it single player. They're seeing each other, they're connecting. And we find that's incredibly powerful, especially when people take the devices off at the end. Now they've got questions, they've seen something weird for the first time. They're thinking about this whole idea about ocean plastics in a completely different way. And we sort of see our role in this part of the journey as sort of getting people into a conversation. We imagine that it's like an on-ramp onto like a busy road. We hope that we can introduce concepts and provoke questions, so when people are taking devices off, they've got conversations they want to have. When we're designing all of our sort of cause awareness projects, we have this sort of simple system, which essentially is 3 buckets, 3 tranches, if you like. Education. So before they do the experience, we want to make sure they're aware of the story that we're going to tell them. So in this case, we're introducing entirely new species that perhaps people are unaware of. And as they're lining up, before they go to the experience, they've got an understanding. Then there's the experience itself. You can sort of see kind of how that works with people. And then the important section at the end is the engagement side. So we don't want to make just experiences just for the point of entertainment. We want to take people to places, and then we want to provoke them to start thinking about decisions in their life as well. There we go. Now, I'll just go back 1 second. We're going too far. Oh, yes. So the challenge we had with the original version of the project was just that it was too big and too heavy to sort of move around. So we ended up taking the experience as the technology evolved from the original 2019 iteration to what you can see next door right now, which is down to the MetaQuest 2. The next project I want to talk to you about, sort of continuing on with the ocean themes, you might have seen a little bit in the trailer there. It's called Critical Distance. Now, the first project we talked about microplastics and our sort of role in human impact with regard to that. In this case, it's really specific. We're talking about the impact of humans on, on a family of orcas that live off the coast of Seattle and Vancouver. They're called the southern resident jade orcas. Now this family in particular, the reason we sort of focused on them, for this project we wanted to talk about marine protected areas, and we knew that in order to engage the public, and going back to that idea of engagement being our main goal, it's very difficult to get people excited or fall in love with kelp or seagrass, but if they can fall in love with a baby orca, this could be our sort of catalyst to start making a case for marine protected areas. Now these particular orcas, they live off the coast between Seattle and Vancouver. They're critically endangered. Their food source is really specifically Chinook salmon, king salmon. Unlike a lot of orcas that you see out in the wild ocean, these orcas have evolved to really, their diet over time is really limited. The problem is, when they started, these fish were huge and it made complete sense why these this type of walkers weren't that way, but now, as river dams have been placed, as the shipping lanes between Seattle, Vancouver and the rest of the world have increased, they're actually critically endangered. The other issue, or the other thing that's interesting, is that they're what's known as the most watched sea mammal in the world. Because of their proximity to these major cities and the people who live on the island, most people have almost a personal relationship with them. Every orca of this particular species are named. They're all part of a complex family unit. And people in the area from Seattle, Vancouver, and that entire Pacific Northwest part of America have a really personal connection to them. Also, the First Nations and the Indigenous people of that area, culturally and ancestrally, have a massive connection to this. So this is a species where there's only 73 left of them in the world. And there's a really short time target that we have to protect them. So we've had the experience where we focused on one orca in particular. When we started developing, she was 5 years, now she's just turned 9 recently. And all of the scientists in the region are really focusing on her future. Her name is Kiki. If she's sort of healthy enough, by the time she's 15, everybody sort of feels like this is a good indicator of where the future of the pond will go. And every year there's a birth and a death. So at the moment the population isn't getting, despite a lot of effort, still sort of being in that area. One of the main things that are affecting Kiki is sound pollution. So we wanted to explore how can we visualize sound. There is chemical pollution in the water is an issue, and prey scarcity of the Chinook salmon that I mentioned, that's an issue. With sound pollution. The sound that we're making as humans from boats and sort of human interaction is having a massive negative impact on how Kiki and the rest of the jade orcas can connect with each other and ultimately hunt, and therefore they're starving to death. So the story is we want to build we want to take audiences into, to make them feel like they're part of the plot. So in the experience, you see the world through what's known as echolocation. So you see the world as Kiki and the rest of the orcas are seeing the world through sound, essentially. And that becomes really powerful as well for audiences seeing this in a whole new way. Again, we've got experience, we've got education, experience, and engagement. So when we launched the project, we launched it at Tribeca again, in the middle of the pandemic, and then we took it to the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. for 9 months. Very different audience, but like a strong museum audience. We were able to build out quite a lot of an exhibit in the education phase before people did the experience. So the experience itself and the engagement side where we really sort of talk to people about what it actually means to interact with this species. And as you can see now, it's a bit of an indication. From a technical side, unlike, Drop in the Ocean is a fully immersive VR experience. This is using pass-through. So we originally developed it with Microsoft HoloLens 2 device. Now it's playing on the Quest 3 device. What it's doing is merging the digital and the physical world. So it's a different experience, but it's incredibly powerful for people because it's familiar and also very different in their lives. What we encourage in the experience is that you can reach out and actually connect with Kiki. So what you're doing is you're disturbing the sound waves that you're creating that you're seeing, but it's the closest you'll get to actually sort of making a physical connection. What's also quite interesting, and this is sort of a weird byproduct that we found through watching audiences do it, when they actually touch the experience, or when they touch Kiki, what they're doing is they're actually they feel a sort of a tactile sense. So we've had people ask, do we have heaters or are there fans running? But it's purely just in people's minds. That's just quite fun. There we are, all people together. Again, it's a shared experience. What's great is it brings people together. The story that I like to tell, and I've sort of mentioned it a couple of times here since I've been here, is that we've recently showed it in Canada. And we had a guy who lived in Calgary, which is in the middle of the country, furthest away from the ocean that he possibly could be. His wife forced him to come to the museum, so he's very proud. So when he took the headset off, he's like, oh, give it here. Within seconds, suddenly you can see his hand, you can see a world that's completely different. By the end of it, he loved the experience, which was great, but in the end, we could never get rid of it. He just had every story from his childhood and suddenly comes back. We realised the power of immersive experiences right there was to unlock a part of his brain that previously, perhaps, he hadn't had a chance to sort of think about what made him fall in love with the ocean when he was a child. He put it away, living in Calgary, but suddenly this had sort of reignited that part of his brain. And finally, we're bringing it together with what we now call sort of the Invisible Ocean exhibit. So, as the technologies evolved, we've taken both Drop in the Ocean, which began as this huge giant jellyfish experience that was played in San Francisco, but we could barely book it anywhere else because of the size of it. We've got away from the cables and the technical restrictions that were, I guess, the state of the art for Drop in the Ocean when it was first launched. Now it's on request devices, so it's got full freedom of movement. Audiences can all interact with each other. We've lost the tracking cameras as well in Drop in the Ocean. It's really important for audiences to be able to see their full body and experience like Drop in the Ocean, so we're using tracking cameras. We've got rid of that now. And with critical distance, we moved away from HoloLens 2 on Quest 3, so now we've got a proposition that is actually feasible for a lot of venues to program. We package it together with Invisible Ocean. We're also very aware that we're reaching out now to audiences that in some cases are too young for devices, so it's important for us to have a way for these young audiences to connect, even if they're too young to be wearing a headset. So this experience is purely with your phone, and it's sort of a side project that goes along. So now when we launch Invisible Ocean, we have Drop in the Ocean, we're pretty good, and we have this AR trail. So this uses people's phones, and what it does is it takes some of the archive that I sort of mentioned before, this amazing sort of marine archive that we have in Vision 3. It uses QR codes to drive it. All the photography is based on larval forms of familiar animals. So people are seeing these crazy, wild, planktonic characters, and now using their phone they can find out what they look like when they actually grow up. And they want to crab. And finally, we're also including what we've called wave makers. This is taking diatoms, this is algae. In the Victorian times, they used to take these sort of microscopic algae photographs, I guess, and recreations and colour them. It's literally a dying art form. We found the last living person who was doing it, and he's 98. And we thought that all hope was lost, and just before we opened the show, he got in touch with us and gave us his blessing. And so what happens with this experience is we've got all these set up with motion cameras, and just audiences suddenly can move their hands, they can move around. So as well as the VR experiences, the AR experiences, we have these projection experiences set up as well. So we're able to take over entire spaces within museums and public spaces and basically space them out within the venue, so we're doing a full kind of takeover, if you like. I'll show you now what it looked like when it all comes together. This is Invisible Ocean.